I'm still smiling at the idea. You just describing that and just how much you could imagine. If you could ever get your customer in the same situation, that same moment of pain that you were in about the prospect of buying your solution, then that is what drives. As you said it yourself, actually, without me even prompting. We weren't even talking in a sales context, but about urgency. You were like urgently wanting to work for AppD at that moment. And the interesting thing as well, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think AppD was the company we know it as, or what it came to be known as at that point. It was. Am I right in saying it was before? It was way pre-acquisition, but even that sort of period before acquisition, where AppD was on everyone's lips as being the hottest shop in town. So you were, you probably walked in there with a bit of swag, just because it was probably one of many opportunities you were probably considering that moment, and how quickly that turned.
Well, two things. To be honest with you, I didn't, as soon as I met Steve, I didn't look at anything else to join. I was so single-minded. It's a bit naive, maybe, and a bit like, I don't know what someone might think about that. It's not particularly smart, but all that I cared about was, working for this person. And, with each person that I then met in the process, that was just further validated that like the oh my God sort of situation. And I didn't need to hear much more. I was like, the way you've made me feel innately makes me understand how I understood it so deeply about what this person was doing to me that I could see it. I could see what good looked like. And I was like, I know that is what great looks like. So I don't need to see anything else, because I know I can see it. And I just need to get that as fast as possible.
Right. So you get the job, and I know it wasn't an easy process. You probably had to meet Jeremy as well. Probably had to go through loads more implications of pain in those interviews, and yeah, I think that that process is well documented. So you've gone from being a top performer in Ghana. You've gone to what is at the moment probably one of the hottest beds of talent at the time, if not the hottest beds of talent, a place to be. You've arrived. You're probably a bit more humble upon arrival after going through the interview process. Yeah. And Gartner is famous for having a really good, sales school, so they teach you the fundamentals really well. What was it like landing in AppD and trying to then pick up the playbook?
It was like, it was, the word that comes to mind, it was like a jungle. It was like and everyone was like a silverback gorilla. Like the alpha males, the meticulousness of the way they work people out, the sharpness of everybody in the way that they interact, and the way they talk to you, and the way they qualify, and the way they act, and the attitude that just, sort of emulates around the whole office. Everyone felt like they were in the greatest show in town, and if anyone didn't know it yet, they were about to. That was the sort of attitude that everyone walked around with. And I was like this Gartner rep, a suited tie, very much at the top of my button, and, very sort of formal selling of the school of, the fundamentals, as you put it, was their great at, to a sort of much more raw, business-like, attitude, whatever. And I said, I'll give you an example of it. As I went to Steve one day, I said, Steve, I've been asking, Rich for this PowerPoint presentation for a few days now, and he still hasn't sent it to me. I really do need it to help me understand this retail use case. Can you ask him to get it for me? Would you mind? And he was like, Jason, and this is why I use the jungle analogy, because this is what he said to me. So Jason, you've just stepped into the jungle. All right. You've got to find a way to figure out how to get people to work for you and get people to do things that you want. Because if you can't do it here, you're never going to be able to do it with your customers. So Rich is testing you. He's seeing your new blood, you're new in, you're not adding value to me. You're not thinking of champion building me. You're just asking for something from me and withdrawing from the relationship. So I'm teaching you a lesson about champion building. You just asking me for a deck that would benefit you that took me a year to build in a strategic deal, and just handing it off to you feels to me like a big withdrawal of value. You don't even know me and you haven't even added any value to me. So I think a very interesting test of like, that's the way they see the world, right? They see the world in this very, binary sort of testing, like that attitude piece I was telling you about. So Steve just said, you've got to figure out how to go and get that deck. And it wasn't that he was being unempathetic or not a great leader. It was again, like, you're going to have to figure this out, Jason, because this is your big learning curve. You're coming from everything being shiny and new and brilliant, gotten a business card, to the jungle. And you need to fucking figure it out, you need to get here and make your way, find your way through here,
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about this before in terms of building champions in your career. And I really like that context, because I think like champion is obviously, a very, something very dear to my heart, as you would expect. But I love that way you talking about that rich chap there, and I relate, because I've been that person before where, I've put my blood, sweat and tears into building something of value for my territory, my customers, and here's someone else just asking for it. And well, what am I going to get? What in the most rawest sense, I want to be number one. And so if I give you something that's helping me towards being number one, then you're going to be a competitor to me. As much as I want you to win and I want my company to win, there's all these dynamics. And so what's in it for me? And so, that kind of, and that is, of course, a vested interest is a clear criteria of champion, whatever champion is. What was kind of the value that Rich was going to get from working with you? And I'd love to, how did you get the deck? Did you win him over?
I actually did. And I think though, I didn't learn champion building. It took me a long time to really learn about champion building. If I'm totally honest, I felt like, I was always rushing to the outcome that was important to me versus really thinking about, humility, like depositing value into a relationship. I was so urgent and so focused on my ambition and what was important to me that if you have that mindset in relationships, you miss out all of that deposit, and you don't go to that as your default of how to build relationships. So I made a series of bad first impressions on people because of that. Again, they didn't make it easy because of the culture and the attitude and the sharpness. But so it wasn't like, oh, come on, we'll just forgive you for all of that. We'll make it easy. It wasn't that environment, right? Which is great because it made you grow. And I think slowly but surely, as I became more comfortable in myself, more confident in who I was and what I was about, and more vulnerable with what I didn't know and more conscious of that, you develop more of a humility and an ability to engage. Let's say you were a champion I wanted to build. I'd be like, look, in fact, even the way that we even started our relationship, I just sent you something that I thought would be of interest to you, that I thought that, hey, you care about MEDDICC. I thought you'd really like to see this piece that I wrote for my team that I think you would find interesting. And you were like, I do find that interesting. That is really interesting. It wasn't like, hey, I want something from you. And it just wasn't my default at all. And even if we didn't get anything going, that wouldn't matter either. It was just about, I want to share something that I thought would be of interest to you. And that's the default.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And by the way, it was brilliant. And we've talked about this, and you've said you're happy for us to share this with the world, because I think it's pretty. I mean, everyone listen, even if you've just listened to this episode, you never heard any of the other episodes. I've already probably done about 17 analogies, so like, even if you're brand new to me, I'm Mr. Analogy, and so I love an analogy. But what you sent me was one of the, if not the best MEDDICC analogies I've heard, I think. Because it just makes it's not just like for me, that a good analogy is where someone goes, okay, I can see, there's two parts. There's, okay, I can see the why that's an analogy, but the best analogies are the ones you can build upon, and you kind of riff with the person. You're like, oh, that bit fits that bit, because that's kind of the definition of analogy. I would love you to share your analogy with our dear audience.
Well, yeah, it's good timing, isn't it? Well, because it's so connected to champion building, wasn't it? So I was basically in a situation, like, for the benefit of the audience, where, and you don't know the backstory actually, where I was doing a lot of deal clinics with people, like, as I get involved and do, as per the coaching, I have deal clinics with the region where people can drop in and out every week to bring me problems. And we call it like the doctor's clinics.
Yeah. Cool.
And I've been running it for a year, and of late, I started looking at them and noticing a pattern in the deals, and it was around champions, which is I felt like we were almost traveling through our sales process without a champion, and we were only starting to realize that we didn't have one when things started to go wrong later on our journey. So I thought, what does this compare to? And I started like riffing it on the clinic. I was like, it's like, we've done the new business meeting, which is us driving on the slip road onto the motorway. And we're on the motorway, which is our sales process. And we're just driving along, unconscious of where we're sort of going. We're looking at our sat nav. It's saying, go in this direction. We have no really idea of what's ahead of us. If there's traffic, if there's speed cameras, if there's police ahead, if there's going to be an issue, if there's road work. We don't know any of that. We're just trusting this map. So keep going. It's good. Everything's got my music on. I'm not really thinking about anything. I'm happy as Larry. But then, you start to realize, see in the distance, red starting to appear on my map, and things are starting to slow down on my journey. And I started to draw a comparison to a sales process where I was like, you reach these problems on the motorway is the same as deals where, the champion suddenly isn't returning my calls as often as I'd like. Or that meeting that we're trying to get in the diary isn't happening as quickly as I would like it to. Or the planning for the proof of value seems to be taking a lot longer than I thought it would. And suddenly now, people are talking about this other vendor that's involved. That I thought we were all sort of sewn up on the idea that we were the only game in town. And suddenly I'm starting to sweat a bit, and the deal is starting to slow down, like our motorway analogy. And I was like, what does this feel like comparable to? And I was like, it's because in that deal analogy, you don't have a champion fighting for you on your behalf, guiding you and protecting you and warning you and helping you navigate through the challenges that you don't know about, that you don't know are happening in their company. So if you relate that to our analogy, it's like you're traveling solo and you don't have someone in your passenger seat who's traveled that journey before. And they're saying to you, hey, just so you know, up ahead, traffic always slows down because the road gets really narrow. So what I recommend you do is you get into this lane quickly and move now, because if you leave it too late, you're going to end up in the traffic jam that's slowing on the left. Oh, thanks, champion. I'm going to move into that lane now, and I'm going to avoid that slowing down of traffic.
And the analogy there is that's their company's security audit that takes 3 weeks. But your champion's saying, hey, if you get in the back of the queue here, it's going to take you 3 weeks. Let me set up a call with our head of security who we can do it live on the call. There'll be a few questions and that's what you're talking about there, which is one of the many things about that analogy that I loved. And what else? There's so many, isn't there?
He could be telling you, or she could be telling you that, right, so there's police cameras ahead, which basically means in deal scenario, we're going to get a big inspection on our deal. We're going to be bringing it to other people, and we will expect people to criticize how fast we're traveling, or how good our deal is, or how, we shouldn't be doing this at this time. So these are the things we need to prepare for. So we need to slow down in our car. We need to make sure we've got all of our indicators pointing in the right direction. We need to be traveling at the right speed. We need to make sure that we're driving with our seatbelts on. Everything's in order, because the police are going to be watching and inspecting our vehicle. The same in a deal. They're going to be looking at the why anything. They're going to be looking at the why Zscaler. They're going to be looking at the why now. They're going to be looking at your comparisons. Do we want to put this live in production right now? Because we're not, all of these things, they're going to inspect your deal. But if you don't know that the police cameras are up ahead, right, you're not going to be forewarned because you don't have a chance. You're going to arrive and you're not going to have your seatbelt on. You are going to be traveling too fast. You are going to be in a position where you've just done a wrong move in your car and you're like, oh, damn it, I've been caught. And that's everything down, or you have to get pulled over and the deal stops entirely.
Right. Or as can happen, you can plan things perfectly. You can have a brilliant champion who's talking you through the entire decision process, be on top of the paper process. But things sometimes, even with everything 10 out of 10, surprises happen. That police car does pull you over because you've got a light out on the back. But here's the good news. Your champion knows the police officer. So softens the fine, softens the penalty, makes the police officer go away. And that, that's why the analogy is just so beautiful.
I know. So I was like, so the way I ended it with the team, I was like, so if you ever find yourself on the slip road, driving onto the motorway, and you're traveling a few miles and you look to your left and there's no one in your passenger seat, pull over, right? Call your RD. Realize that you need to go and pick somebody up because you don't want to travel any further with all of the problems that might take place on your long journey, right? Full of potential issues. Don't travel any further until you have one.
Yes. Yeah. And it comes back to that, a very simple saying to finish a fun, deep analogy of like, no champion, no deal, big champion, big deal. I think, you'll see it with your deal clinics. I see it with, when I do similar sort of conversations with companies. And when I was doing the same sort of things, deal clinics, we used to do a sort of doctor theme to it as well. So I'm glad that that's like, wasn't just me. Same thing. You would, if you haven't got a champion, it's like you say, stop the car. You need to, you can't go any further. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily stop the deal. But it should mean that should become your top priority, because I always say this, if you look at all the classic objections we face about competition doing a better job than we do in the eyes of the customer, about price, about priorities, all of these things, whatever the objection is, we all as experienced salespeople have tactics, strategies, manners of overcoming those objections. But all of those tactics and strategies are virtually useless without a champion. Because if we don't have the person who can take that our way of overcoming that objection and put it into action, their side of the organization, then we're just talking up into thin air things that aren't going to be actions. So, that's why I think, on this, I generally always ask people, well, I can't ask you now because I've sort of preempted it, but I always ask people what they think is the most important part of MEDDICC. And I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to ask you to see what you come up with.
Oh, I could probably be debated against what I'm going to say, but I have a point of view. I would say that it's pain because, and it might strike you as being maybe the wrong answer. It might be the wrong answer, but my belief is that if you don't have pain that is absolutely real. Let's just agree that it has to be a grade 3 wise, for example. If you don't have a grade 3 wise, a champion will never reveal themselves anyway. If you don't have something that is going to meaningfully matter to them, that you're going to change in their professional life. And that is born out of an initiative or a thing that needs to happen because they're not looking for friends. They're not looking for a drinking buddy. They're looking for someone to help them overcome something that they can't do on their own. Therefore, if champion is the route to the rest of MEDDICC, pain is the route to revealing the champion. So therefore, pain must be the thing that matters most above everything else, which is why I coach people to view themselves in the early parts of the deal as detectives, as problem solvers, as consultants of figuring out business issues that only we can solve and create cases around. Because if you take that to someone who's smart and ambitious, a champion, and you go, hey, check this out. I think we can do this. I think there's something in this initiative and how we can help and the savings and the potential value and how it will help with your professional win to get X, Y, and Z in your life. What do you think of doing this together? What do you think of working on this together? That would make that person interested and pay attention and want to spend time with you because you're adding value and you've unlocked something there. You know what I mean?
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. And there's two things I want to dig into there. One is around the pain champion sort of being the most popular answer to that question. The other is about the we don't want our champions to be our friends. So we'll start with the pain thing. I have actually a theory because you articulated it much better than I do, but I absolutely agree with you. The pain is the most important, because without pain, there's no gain. Like, no pain, no gain, no champion. And actually, if you know, to link the next point, which is like, if you have a champion without a pain, are they really going to be a champion when you need them? Or are they just someone that's going to like your time, like the idea of working with your company because they know that you're going to take them to Wimbledon, all that sort of stuff, which is part of what we do. But, you know, that's obviously shouldn't be the driving factor. And so my theory here, though, is to why the most common answer to that question when I ask it is champion, is that generally speaking, and I don't mean any disservice to any other guests or anything like that, but generally speaking, people that I ask, they are looking at deals from a perspective of where there is already a deal there. So when they're looking at a deal and they're seeing these deals and forecast calls and all sort of stuff, they're saying, well, you know, that deal hasn't got a champion. That's the most important thing you need to work on right now. And they are right. If there's a real deal, you know, like a valid opportunity, then yes, the most important thing is a champion. But to your point, you don't get that champion without there being a real pain. So the pain comes first and therefore is the most important, because without the pain, you get like a faux champion, or you just kind of get lucky and then they figure out that later on that there's some pain there. So that is, yeah, I'm glad that finally somebody I have somebody that I could agree with on that point. And it's not to say that I don't think champion is important. Of course, it's critical when you have a real deal, but it's that first bit is, I think, pain's more important. The second thing you said there, which I really liked, and I've heard you talk about it before, is about not wanting our champions to be friends. And I think there's this common misconception where we have to, you know, I'm not going to get into the, like, do we need to be liked in sales thing, but the thing about our champions having to really like us as being like a primary factor, I don't believe that at all. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I think it is, especially, I think this problem is exacerbated in a remote digital world where we're moving to digital channels being a mode of how people are going to continue to build champions. Because I think I saw Gartner stat that by 2025, 80% of all sales communication will happen in digital channels. So if we take that forward, like to your point about relationship building, it's got to evolve, because that would have been 80% the other way, you know, a couple of years ago, right? So if you don't take that data point and think that change has to happen, you're bonkers. So I think that more and more, if I take myself as a buyer, the people that add value to me are people, or the people that become champions are people I think are just super smart, that own a problem for me, that I feel like are working on my behalf, with connection to me and taking my input into something that is almost scaling myself to help me get marginal gains and lift in my business through acting like something that's helping me solve a problem that I don't actually feel equipped or time, resource constrained to solve. But because I have you, I feel like I'm gaining someone from my team that can help me do something that I didn't think was possible on my own. You're adding value, you're adding insight, you're adding work, you're adding resource, you're adding connection by bringing people into the conversation that need to be in it without me having to do that. You're making me feel credible enough to introduce you to my boss, so that's not a difficult conversation to do. So we're going to be able to get sponsorship easy because you're brilliant. So all of those things just made me feel like I like that person for those reasons. If that person was not my cup of tea in terms of character or personality type, that's disconnected to all of that stuff. Right?
Yeah.
I can even find their mannerisms a bit off-putting, but wouldn't mind if all of those things were being delivered, because as long as they're being authentic and they're being who they are and sincere, I don't care what they're like, you know?
Yeah. And I agree as well, but I would actually put one layer on top of that. Would say in some instances, not all, but in some instances, I think it's actually a bad thing to have a champion that I am very friendly with because I like them a lot and I feel like they like me, because I don't know, but I don't speak for everyone, but I think most people have their own friends, their own social circles outside of work. We're not going to work to find friends. We're not going to work to find best, buddies. We're going to work for, to achieve our goals. And so actually the idea of the idea of getting into a situation where I feel like I can't hold, the reason why I want a champion is because I want somebody who's going to help me towards the goal of winning a customer. And for them, the goal is they'll have a vested interest as well, because whatever it is that they're getting from my solution is going to help them towards their goal as well. So we have like a mutual goal. And that's why I need a champion. And the problem that I see happen, and I can talk from my own personal experience as well here earlier in my career, where I had someone I really gelled with, like got on really well with, texting and just talking about other things, and someone that I felt could be a good friend, is I can't hold them to account when I need to, because I don't want to upset them as my friend. And I don't want to push them into action that I need them to do sometimes, which is not, I can remember one example. And this funny thing about this is this person has actually gone on to become a good friend of mine. So this is kind of a funny end to the story. But at the time, I remember this champion I had was beating me up on price. We were like, our solution was genuinely 5 or 6 times more than the competition, but we had identified something in our decision criteria that was unique, that had a whole use case and business value to it that our competitor didn't have. So it was not a case of like, well, there's a disparity in price. It was like, well, that's a different solution. You're not comparing apples to apples. But as much as that was an isolated USP in the decision criteria, they had admitted, and we had a business case backing up, everything was, locked up. All the time, you need to negotiate the price. You need to reduce the price. But which is one thing, which is okay, customers negotiating. But the flip side to it was, because you are 5x what your competitor is. And I felt like I'd been saying politely, because he was my, because he wasn't my friend at this point, but he was someone that I liked, and we'd been out for dinner, and we'd hit it off as two people who share mutual interest and views and stuff. And I felt like I was probably in hindsight too patient, and it got to the point where I ran out of patience. And I remember, and I'm sure you've done this, I'm sure people listening have done this, I made peace that I'd lost the deal, but I knew that there was only one thing I had left to do to not lose it, which was just basically just call out my champion, say, look, I've been through this. And I, not rude, but very firmly said, we've been through this. We cannot reduce our price relative to our competitor, because it's, for all the reasons I mentioned, it's not the same product. You're not comparing. You can't even buy our competitor's solution based on the business case we put together. So can we? And I basically just said, can we just stop this now? Because we should just conclude this project, because it's not going to go anywhere. And I remember that sort of silence. You could hear a pin drop, and I remember thinking, well, that's that gone. That's that deal gone. I blew that one. And then everything changed, and he was like, okay, I understand. What we do need to do something on the price. I won't mention the competitor again. And he came round, and we'd got the deal done. It turned out to be a great customer. He spoke at the annual conference. They'd done case studies. They went on to triple in size in terms of as a customer. All good stuff. But I remember at that point thinking, yeah, I've lost this. I've lost this deal because I've just ruined my friendship, as it were, with this person. But now, like, we're Instagram buddies, we're Facebook friends, we chat every kind of couple of weeks kind of thing. So it's kind of funny in that sort of context.
Well, I think you sum it up beautifully. I think the lesson that I give to people is, when they're worried about having those uncomfortable conversations, because that's a learning in itself, is all champion relationships that I've seen stand the test of time are ones that are born out of friction. Because if you're not having and I talked about this earlier this week even to my teams, you're not having conversations with the champion that feel contentious sometimes, that feel like there's tension or friction or a differing point of view, then neither of you are engaged at the level of depth in the conversation where it matters, where it's emotional, where if you're not at an emotional layer of conversation, you're at that surface layer where everyone's just dipping their toe into not really describing how they feel. And unless you're accessing that other stuff, you're not really having a truthful conversation with someone about whether they're going to fight for you, whether they believe in the deal, whether they don't believe in that metric or that point of view or that use case, and whether you can defend your point of view. So you're not really testing the relationship.
Yeah.
And as you know, champion building, it's like identify, build, test, use are the stages of champion building. So rarely we see mediocre salespeople ever get to that test bit where they're actually got enough trust to have a difficult conversation, and they just skip past that and just hope that the building that they've done will work, but they've never actually validated if it will. And what you did there was, I'm going to finally call you out and test you. And what you were fortunate enough was to realize that he was a champion, right? You got the result you hoped for. But if he wasn't a champion, you'd have just spent 6 months trying to build him, but you wouldn't have known until that moment whether he failed or not. So we have to encourage testing people as early as possible in our process to get a read on whether that person is the right character to be a champion.
I love that. Yeah. I think it's something John McMahon says around seeking discomfort as well. I know that's what you're talking about there, looking for that sort of conflict, that sort of friction.
Bad news.
Yeah, that was always a great sort of, for me, a great sign of a real champion is when they tell you, bad news quickly. That's the things you really want to hear. You don't want to just keep hearing good news, because that's obviously it doesn't really. If you're in control of your deal, good news you should already be aware of the good news. It's the bad news that's behind the scenes when you can't see it that you want to know about. So that's a super interesting one. Wow. Well, Jason, I feel like I could go on and continue this conversation for hours. I've got, all of the things that there's so many topics I wanted to get into, but the ones that we've talked about have superseded those 10x, because I just think that you have such a refreshing view of our wonderful world of sales. And so I'm gonna ask you now, while you're on the record, that I'd love to get you back on the show for a follow up to this, to dig into more of those. So thank you for that. But for now, if people, are you hiring at the moment? Are you looking to find some new talent?
Yeah, so specifically, actually, I did a post about this on LinkedIn earlier this week. We are, based on our unprecedented success in our strategic accounts part of our business, we're now expanding that practice, which is really good news. So we're looking for the ICE criteria of intelligent character, coachable people with great experience. But people people who are out there that really want to make a difference in doing transformational deals in really strategic accounts where they feel like they need the right technology, the right market opportunity, the right coaching and leadership to go do something special. We now have a practice dedicated to those individuals where we want to go and make something, special happen. So we're hiring for those people right now.
Wow. Those are the roles that very few and far between come around. And when they're not just roles because of, vacancies popping up, but because you've had to increase the size of the team, that's a super positive thing. So, anyone listening, find you on LinkedIn. Is that the best place to catch you?
That's the best place. Yeah.
Good stuff. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And as we've already caught, you're going to come back on so we can get more into all this stuff and talk further. But yeah, thank you so much. And may your champions be strong.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I just would like to say thank you to you too. It's like, I've learned a few things too, like in terms of just riffing about champion building and stuff. And I think the theme of today's session has been very much born out of like finding champions in your job to go work for, finding champions in your company to go and build, finding champions in your deals, and thinking about all that people stuff, which actually, like you said, I didn't know that we would go there in this conversation, but I really enjoyed just going deep in that area.
It's a fascinating topic, isn't it? Where you, I bet you there's a book to be written about unpicking, great successes in business, great successes in careers, great successes in sport, achievements basically that are directly correlated or at least linked to a champion, being a parent, being a partner, being a manager, being an inspiring character who wrote a book about themselves and their journey, that's therefore became a kind of a leading champion for people. So that's a fascinating topic in itself. And it's been fun talking to you about it. Thanks.
Really fun talking to you.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.